Okay, so just a reminder, your quiz is on 4.6 and 4.7 on Tuesday. So even though I'm not there on Monday, you still have your quiz on Tuesday. So I'm going to go over the review with you guys. We already did the first one from each section, so I'm just going to do the rest. So number 2, we have to find what value completes the square. We use our little formula, b over 2 squared. So anytime you're completing the square, you use this formula here. So we have our b comes from the number in front of the x term. So that would be 4 over 2 squared. 4 over 2 simplifies to 2. And 2 squared is 4. So 4 would complete the square for us. For the next section, we're solving by completing the square. So this is where we go all the way and find x equals our two numbers. So again, we went over this on Friday, but in order to complete the square, we need our x's to be on one side and our number to be on the other. And then we're going to use this formula again too. So b over 2 squared. So first thing we want is all of our terms with variables on one side. So just these two all by themselves. That 9 needs to go to the other side. So we're going to add 9 to both sides. So we have b squared minus 8b. I'm going to leave a space for that number that completes the square for us. And then 0 plus 9 is 9. So now we need that b over 2 squared. So this would be negative 8 over 2 squared. Negative 8 over 2 simplifies to negative 4. And negative 4 squared is 16. So we're adding 16 on the left side. We got to add 16 on the right side too. Then we have our parentheses squared. And the two things that are squared on the left side, so we have that b squared and negative 4 squared, go into our parentheses. So b minus 4. And then that's equal to 9 plus 16, which is 25. Then we want to solve for v. So our goal is to get v all by itself. So we have to undo everything on the left side of our equation. So we want to take the square root of both sides. So this cancels out with the squared. So we have b minus 4 is equal to, and then the square root of 25. Don't forget, whenever you take the square root of both sides, you have to include a plus or minus. The square root of 25 is 5, so plus or minus 5. Now we got one more step to do here. We have v minus 4 is equal to positive 5. V minus 4 is equal to negative 5. So we want to split this up into our two equations. B minus 4 is equal to positive 5. B minus 4 is equal to negative 5. Solve for v. So we add 4 on both sides. Since we're subtracting, we want to do the opposite to get rid of it. So v is equal to 5 plus 4, which is 9. Do the same thing in our second equation. Add 4 to both sides. So v is equal to negative 5 plus 4, which is negative 1. So these are our two answers here for v. All right, let's go to number 5. So again, we want to get all of our terms with variables all by itself. So we want to move this 11 to the other side. So since we're subtracting 11 to move it over, we do the opposite. So we're going to add 11 on both sides. So we have n squared minus 6. N, I'm going to leave a space for that number that completes the square. And then on the right side, I have 5 plus 11, which is 16. Now I have my b over 2 squared that goes in this blank. My b is negative 6, so negative 6 over 2 squared. Negative 6 over 2 simplifies to negative 3. So negative 3 squared would be 9. So I'm adding 9 to the left side. I got to add 9 to the right side too. And I have my parentheses squared. Two things that are squared goes into my parentheses. So 2n minus 3 squared. And then that's equal to 16 plus 9, which is 25. Again, we have to get rid of that square root. we have to get rid of the squared, so we square root both sides because that'll cancel out. And anytime we take the square root of both sides, we have to put that plus or minus there. And the square root of 25 is 5. So anytime you take the square root of both sides, that's when you put your plus or minus. So n minus 3 is equal to positive and negative 5. N minus 3 is equal to positive 5. N minus 3 is equal to negative 5. We have to solve for n. So since we're subtracting 3, we do the opposite to move it over. So we want to add 3. N is equal to 5 plus 3 is 8. Do the same thing in the second one. Add 3. Add 3. N is equal to negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. So these are our two answers. Alright, number 6. So we want to get our variables all by themselves. Got to move that 8 to the other side. So we're going to subtract 8 because we're adding, so we want to do the opposite so it'll cancel out. So we have a squared plus 6a. We're going to leave a space for that number that completes the square, and that is equal to negative 8. So then we have our b over 2 squared, so 6 over 2, remember that's our b, 6 over 2 squared. 6 over 2 simplifies to 3, and 3 squared is 9. So we're adding 9 on the left, we got to add 9 on the right. On the left we have our parentheses squared. Our two terms with squares are a and 3. So in our parentheses we put a plus 3. And then we have negative 8 plus 9, which is 1. Got to get rid of that squared, so we take the square root of both sides. So this cancels. So we have a plus 3 is equal to, anytime we take the square root, got to put plus or minus. So we have a plus 3 is equal to positive 1, a plus 3 is equal to negative 1. So a plus 3 is equal to 1, a plus 3 is equal to negative 1. Got to get a all by itself. Since we're adding 3, we want to do the opposite, so we subtract 3. So a is equal to 1 minus 3, which is negative 2. Do the same thing for the next equation. So a is equal to negative 1 minus 3 would be negative 4. So negative 2 and negative 4 are our two answers here. Okay, that's everything on the first page. So that was all from 4.6. That's completing the square. We have one more little part from 4.6, which is solving equations using square roots. But we don't have to use our formula. We are just trying to get our variable by itself. So for these, again, we're not using our formula. So we don't use any formula. We just have to get that x all by itself. We're solving for x. So we have to undo everything that's happening to it, but we always save the squared for last. So here we just do PEMDAS, but in reverse. So we start with our division. Since 4 is being multiplied, we do the opposite, so that's why we divide 4. So it cancels out there. So we have x squared is equal to 36 divided by 4, which is 9. Now once we get that x squared all by itself, we square root both sides. Anytime we take the square root of both sides of our equation, we need that plus or minus. And the square root of 9 is 3. So x is equal to plus or minus 3. Number 9. Again, we want to get this a all by itself. We're going to do the square root last. So we would get that negative 5 to the other side. So we want to add 5. Since it's being subtracted, we do the opposite. So we add 5 to both sides. So a squared is equal to negative 5 plus 5 would be 0. Then we take the square root of both sides. a is equal to, here we wouldn't put plus or minus because there's no such thing as a negative 0, so this would be the one case where you don't put plus or minus. You would just put 0 because the square root of 0 is just 0, and there's no such thing as a positive 0 or a negative 0. Alright, last one from this section, number 10. So we want to move that 3 to the other side. So since it's being subtracted, we do the opposite, so we add it. So a squared is equal to 22 plus 3, which is 25. Now that we got that a squared all by itself, we can take the square root of both sides, so this cancels. A is equal to, anytime we take the square root of both sides, you need that plus or minus, and the square root of 25 is 5. So a is equal to positive 5 and negative 5. Now we're moving on to solving our equations with the quadratic formula. So this is our quadratic formula. You will be able to have it in front of you for the quiz tomorrow. So those at home, make sure you have it written down next to you. You want to use this, have it in front of you for the quiz. And then another thing we have to know for these is that we need to get it equal to 0 before we start. So here, we got to move this 7n to the other side, so we're going to subtract 7n. And we want to keep it in our order, so we have n squared, then n, then our number. So 6n squared minus 7n plus 4. It matters what number your a, your b, and your c are, so you have to keep it in the order of n squared, n, then your number, or x squared, x, then your number, whatever your variable is. So now we need to find our a, our b, and our c. So it's always the number in front, your coefficients. So we have 6, negative 7, and 4. Now we just plug it into our formula. So our formula is negative b, so negative 7, plus or minus the square root of b squared, minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a. So we got to simplify. This negative out front becomes a plus, so that is a positive 7 plus or minus. Negative 7 squared is negative 7 times negative 7, so that gives us 49. And then we have negative 4 times 6, which is negative 24. And negative 24 times 4, let's see, we got 24 times 4, 4 times 4 would be 16. 2 times 4 would be 8, so 96, and that would be negative 96 over 2 times 6, which is 12. If you guys want to for tomorrow, you can use a calculator. The only thing that you would really need it for are like when you're multiplying these numbers. So you can use a calculator if you would like. Plus or minus. Now we have to subtract. So we have 49 minus 96. That would give us negative 47 over 12. So just for these, make sure you simplify as much as you can. We only want one number under our square root. So do all the math that's under the square root and then simplify out front too if you need to. So for this one we had to simplify because we had 2 negatives out front. So you want to simplify that part too. Alright, so let's look at 13. We've got to do the same thing here. We want to move this 9 to the other side, so we're going to add 9 on both sides. Always check and see if you can combine it with anything, but we don't have any like terms that we can combine here, so that 9 just stays at the end. And then we need our A, our B, our B, and our C. So our A is 10, B is 6, and C is 9. Plug it all into our formula. Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a. So negative 6 out front, plus or minus 6 squared is 36, minus 4 times 10 is 40, and 40 times 9, negative 40, and negative 40 times 9 would be 360 over 2 times 10, which is 20. We still have to simplify under our square root. 36 minus 360 would be negative 324 over 20. So this is our final answer here. Alright, next. Same thing, gotta move the 2 to the other side. So we're gonna add 2 on both sides. So 3a squared minus a plus 2 is equal to 0. We need our a, our b, and our c. So our a is 3, our b, we have a variable there, but no number in front, so that means it would be 1. But since it's minus, it's negative 1. If we were missing that variable, that's when our b would be 0. But since we have that a there, our b is 1, and then c is 2. So we plug everything in. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a. So negative 1 becomes positive 1, plus or minus. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, and negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. And then 2 times 3 is 6. So we have 1 plus or minus the square root. 1 minus 24 is negative 23 over 6. So this is our answer. Alright, that is it for the second part here. So these are solving our equations with the quadratic formula. This is our quadratic formula. Okay, last couple problems. These are finding the discriminant of each quadratic equation, then state the number and type of solutions. So we have to use this formula to find the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So again, we have to do the same thing we were doing before. Has to be equal to 0, so we got to move it to the other side, and then we have our a, b, and c. Just plug it in. So here we want to add 9 on both sides and subtract 6n. Make sure you keep it in that order with your n squared, your n, then your number. So n squared minus 6n plus 9 is equal to 0. Our a is 1, our b, negative 6, c, 9. Plug it in. So b squared minus 4 times a times c. Negative 6 squared is 36. Minus 4 times 1 is just negative 4. And negative 4 times 9 would be negative 36. So minus 36. 36 minus 36 is 0. So our discriminant is 0. And when our discriminant is 0, that means we have one real solution. So I'll put a little note here. If our discriminant is a positive number, we have 2 real solutions. If our discriminant is 0, we have 1 real solution. And if our discriminant is negative, we have no real solutions. So make sure you know this for your quiz tomorrow. Let's look at 17. So we want to move all of this to the other side, so we got to do the opposite. So 2 is positive, we want to subtract 2. And then b is negative, so we want to add b. Just make sure you keep it in that order, so we have negative 2b squared plus b minus 2. So you always need your squared, then your non-squared variable, and then your number. So we have our a, our b, and our c. A is negative 2, b is 1, and c is negative 2. So we plug it in, b squared minus 4 times a times c. 1 squared is 1. Negative 4 times negative 2 would be positive 8. And positive 8 times negative 2 is negative 16. So 1 minus 16. 1 minus 16 gives us negative 15. So that's our discriminant. And if our discriminant is negative, we have no real solutions. All right, last question. We want to move this 1 to the other side, so subtract 1. Negative 7p squared minus 8p minus 1 is equal to 0. We need our a, our b, and our c. A is negative 7, b is negative 8, c is negative 1. Plug it in, b squared minus 4 times a times c. So negative 8 squared is 64, positive, because negative times a negative is positive. Negative 4 times negative 7 is positive 28, and positive 28 times negative 1 is negative 28. So we have 64 minus 28, and that gives us 36. A positive 36, so we have 2 real solutions. Alright, so that's it for the review. Your quiz is going to have a question or two from every section on the review. And if you have any questions about the quiz, you didn't understand something from the review, email me and I'll get back to your emails to answer your questions. So don't forget, quiz is on Tuesday. I'll see you guys on Tuesday.